Hi, I'm Ross. Sometimes I have ideas on things. This particular idea has been burning in me like a tiny hot coal that just won't go away. Now, when you hear it, you might think it's unremarkable, and for some of you it is. But if you watch this video, I think you'll understand why I just can't let it go and how it eventually leads to me becoming a space wizard. Because that part might not be obvious. Okay, here's a question for you. If you could have any kind of software, what would it do? We'd probably get a wide variety of answers. People use computers for all kinds of different things. In fact, feel free to chime in on what you would want. Well, I know my answer. Now, there's probably a program idea that could save lives or advance the human race or something. I don't know anything about that. So my brain jumps straight to the fun stuff. So this video is going to be all about my dream software. What it is, who would want it, everything. Now, this is the internet, so if you have a short attention span, I made a ShamWow version for you at the end, so you can jump straight to that, get the idea in about a minute, then go tell your friends and yell at them to make it happen. Later, that gives it all away though. So if you really want to understand the concept, just keep watching. All will be revealed. And before I get started, some of you may see problems with what I'm saying. I'm probably aware of them, but I'm in the dreaming phase here. I'll eventually float back down to reality. Stay positive on this. Okay, here's the concept. My dream software would extract 3D worlds, particularly for games, and then assist the user as much as possible in repurposing the data. It would have two main ways of doing this. But what do I mean by extracting worlds? Well, say you're in a game and you see the world and you think it looks amazing. There's landscape, sky, structures, maybe people or creatures. That's all 3D data. Polygons, textures, animations, lighting instructions. It is data. Now, a big produced game can take mind-bogglingly complex code to create. There are many, many layers of processing going on underneath to bring you that game. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about recreating just what you see on the screen and exporting that as 3D data that can be used elsewhere. Now, I've had this idea a long time. I think decades. I used to think it was complete fantasy, but things have happened since then. The good news is some of this is reality now, but it's like the world passed it on by. The program 3D Ripper DX is capable of grabbing 3D geometry and textures from some 3D games straight out of the video card memory. Then you can export that to be opened by 3D modeling software. Now this is a big step forward to what I'm talking about, but it's only for older DirectX games, and I think isn't updated anymore. Plus, I'm trying to extract whole worlds, and this would only get what's in your immediate vision, since most 3D games are constantly purging data you don't see. And even if you did grab everything you wanted, you're going to need a 3D modeling background to work with this. There's a lot of steps involved in going from recording this in a game to accessing it in another engine. But this is still a great concept. I mentioned two ways of extracting worlds. This will be one of them. It would also extract the 3D data from memory, but then it could maybe use some AI pattern recognition to stitch together different perspectives all into one map as you walk around. Then, once it had that data, instead of needing intermediate steps, it would have the option of exporting a map straight to a standard engine with some collision data so you could walk around in it. Maybe some other features too. I'll get to that. In other words, I'd want this streamlined as much as possible. So you wouldn't have to be a 3D modeler or mapper to turn this into something usable. You just have to go through the game and feed the data into the software. I'd also want this working on as many APIs as possible. DirectX 11, 12, Vulkan, OpenGL, everything. So that's one version of the software. The second version I never would have thought possible, and maybe it still isn't, but damn it, we're getting closer. A while ago, NVIDIA put out a video where they used AI learning to analyze footage of driving through the city, then generated a 3D model of the city with textures from the video. This may look primitive, but this blew me away. They managed to recreate the city in 3D space from 2D footage, and it looks like it's halfway there. I haven't been able to let this idea go since I saw this. This is far beyond what I thought was possible. Now, I've since learned what I thought they did in this video may not be what they did do, since it's unclear how the 3D models were generated. So this may have had nothing to do with model generation. Well, that sucks. If my dream was based on an illusion. But you know what? It's still not complete fantasy. Last year, Samsung announced they were working on what I thought NVIDIA was doing, and this year, there was a demo of converting totally 2D images into 3D using pattern recognition. The thought that an AI can do this unassisted from a 2D image just blows my mind. We have got to turn this loose on game worlds. This would be so helpful. The possibilities are teeming. Plus, unlike the first method, if it's an online game, it might detect reading the video card memory as a hack and ban you. Don't want that. Whereas if you're recording video, there's nothing they can do to stop that. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this all kind of pointless? If you can run the game, then everything's already there. What's the point in copying 3D graphics? Good question, Jim. There are multiple reasons. The main one is once the data is in an open engine like Unreal or Unity, you can do almost anything. So what would you do? Well, I think there are 3 demographics of gamers whom this would appeal to. And wouldn't you know it, I happen to belong to all 3. So I'm going out of my mind thinking about this. So let's talk about who this is for. Okay, the first group who would want this, modders and people who want crossover content. Have you ever wanted to bring over one game into another? Don't answer that. I know people have. People want Contra in their Mario, Star Wars in their Skyrim, or one of my favorites, Counter-Strike in their Gone Home. Fits like a glove. Or maybe you just want to experience the same game but in a different way. I've seen a mod recreating Zombies Ate My Neighbors in Dune. It's almost shocking how good a fit that is. Or maybe you want to extract an old game world that has crappy draw distance and would like to see the full thing in all its glory. I've seen a port of Daggerfall over to Unity with over 12 times the draw distance of the original. Looks good to me. I can think of plenty of isometric 3D games I'd love to see from the ground level from a first-person perspective. Now this would all still take work. My dream software wouldn't solve that. But if you can rip the maps, then this all gets a lot easier. The more open your game is to modding, the more you can do. Hey, to this day there are still people who play Need for Speed 3 because they love the gameplay. Well, imagine if you could import a track for that from another game. Or another game. Or another game. We could just keep going. My dream software would let you take any map from any 3D game and let you mix it up however you want it. I'm sure a lot of you can think of combinations you'd like to see. This would explode options for modders and open up crossover content. So that's the first group. The second group I can think of are game preservationists. Okay, let's get this out of the way. My dream software would not preserve games. Probably. They're too complex. Just grabbing the 3D data doesn't get you even half of the whole game. Although, earlier this year, NVIDIA released a video showing how they recreated a playable version of Pac-Man just from feeding footage into the AI. In other words, the AI programmed the game with original code just from watching the real thing thousands of times. But Pac-Man's a pretty simple game. This is probably just a best case scenario. This isn't gonna happen much. So how does this help with game preservation? Okay, if you've watched my other videos, you know that I think the worst thing happening in gaming today is the intentional destruction of games. There are dozens of ways to preserve normal games. That's not the problem. Those aren't going anywhere. But way too many companies nowadays are selling games that rely on their server, give no guarantee how long that stays up, then as soon as they shut it down, your game is bricked and no one can ever play it again. Now, I talk about the legality of this, or lack of it, in another video. The point is, too many games are getting destroyed. Well, if we had the dream software, we could start to fight back against this without having to wait on the courts. Because the law is going to solve this problem sometime between a few years and never. Meanwhile, games are still getting destroyed. Personally, it stings when I see a game that's really nice looking and relies on a central server, knowing that someday the parent company is going to kill it. It makes it harder for me to enjoy it. Some players even accept this as normal. I don't know what to say to that. The whole point of games is to get away from dystopia, not import it. Well, I don't accept this, and if I knew that any games as a service that came out, I could rip the world straight out of, and companies couldn't destroy that, that would definitely soften the blow for me when these games shut down, because then there would still be something left. It's funny, I've been trying to make this video for a while now, and I was already planning to use footage from Destiny 2, because the game looks gorgeous, and this is a perfect example of a game worth preserving, that will be dead when they shut down the servers one day. Then lo and behold, they announced that they're removing content from it because the game is too big. I can't keep up. Now thankfully, this isn't a worst case scenario, yet, because they've said they may bring it all back someday. Well, all I can say is get it on video if it does come back. Regardless of what you think of the game, personally I think it's kind of average. Visually, it's a work of art. To shut that down just shows so little respect for everyone involved. Right now, when games are destroyed, sometimes they come back, but that's the exception more than the rule. It's usually because code was either leaked or else some super fans reverse engineered the server software. Well, that's awesome when it does happen, but let's get real here. Only some people on the planet are capable of reverse engineering encrypted server software. And even if they can, I don't even want to think about how much work that is. So it's a long shot every time it happens. But compare that to if my dream software existed. Well then, any idiot could record and map out the game world while it was still up, and maybe a bunch of other assets. Now that doesn't get us a game, but once the assets are in a game engine, then fans who wanted to bring it back could start working on creating an imitation of the original using the assets. And working in a game engine, yeah, you can't be Gomer Pyle and do that, but that's 100 times more accessible than cracking protocols to create a server emulator. So a lot more people could try to resurrect the game then, which increases the odds of it happening. Now, it would never be exactly the same, but it could get closer and closer. And unlike server emulators, if fans only got halfway on a project and bailed, well, then you'd still have half a game. Whereas halfway on a server emulator means you may still have nothing usable. Plus, it would depend on the complexity of the game. Say it's a racing game. Well, if we have the courses and the car models and some driving physics, that could be over half the game right there. The simpler the game, the better a chance it has of being restored to something similar. So games like arena shooters, MOBAs, DayZ clones, those all stand a decent chance of coming back in some form, if you can rip the game worlds. Even complex games though, if it has superfans, a lot can happen. I saw not long ago a report on fans who have spent 10 years recreating Middle-earth in Minecraft. That's a long time to be doing that. I've also read about a recent project to port Sonic Adventure 2 to Sonic Adventure 1. In an earlier post, they said they spent months of hard work doing this. I can't understand why they did this, since those are both the same engine, and my understanding is the original works fine. That would be like porting Doom 2 to Doom 1, or Half-Life 2 Episode 2 to Episode 1. I just don't know why you... But if fans are willing to go to those lengths, then good God, let's get some better tools in their hands and see what they could do with games that most need the help. Can you imagine if diehard MMO fans had all the models, maps, and textures, and they just had to recreate their favorite game in a different engine? We'd have less dead games right now. Do not underestimate MMO fans. Now, if this all sounds insane to you, recreating a game that already works because the company that made it is now destroying it, yes, it is. And this is all horrendously inefficient. But remember, the alternative is nothing. Me personally, I'd rather have a game that kind of looks like the original than absolutely nothing. So every single complaint some of you may have about how this isn't a great method of preservation, remember, you're competing against nothing.
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Yeah, I'm in the let's have something camp. I'm also in the destroying games that people paid for should be illegal camp, but... And hey, the best part about this for game preservation If we used AI extrapolation from video, then this would work on streamed games. Yeah, how's that for outside the box thinking? Preserving streaming games. I mean, the law is the only sure way to stop game destruction, but in the absence of that, this is the best I can come up with. It's a hell of a problem. Okay, those are two groups of gamers whom I think would want the Dream software. But those are not actually the reasons I'm so hellbent on this idea. For me, those are just the bonuses. There's one more video that cemented my idea of this. I have a love and hate relationship with the game Path of Exile. It's a great game, and it also has lots of cheap psychologically manipulative designs to get you to waste more time on it than you would otherwise. So I try to hold off from playing it for a couple years at a time until there's enough new stuff to not be wasting my time. Well, there was one trailer for it that not only roped me back in at the time, but also reignited something in me that had been dormant for a long while. Here you go.
It was there, in the void between worlds, where the seeds of creation swirled before my eyes.
You hear that? You see what this guy's doing?
It was there that I truly awoke.
He's casually walking through world after world like he owns them. He's seeing everything. Forget the game, that's my dream. He's living my dream. I want in on that. If anything, the trailer doesn't do justice to his words. Let's see if we can spruce it up some.
Verdant canopies that shroud the world in darkness. Colossal caverns, vast and silent. Fields of dancing flames that never rest. Mountain peaks perched on a meadow of clouds.
Yeah, so the game added this interdimensional traveler called the Shaper, and he just walks across worlds. Well, what does that have to do with my software? See, this entire software is really just me working backwards from my conclusion. Where I want to end up is where he is, just moving from plane to plane. See, the Shaper is just a game character, but I'm trying to do the real thing. Well, as real as this is gonna get. Again, once game data is in an accessible engine, you can do almost anything with it. That includes virtual reality. Now, I'm not trying to sell anybody on VR. Frankly, it's not for everybody. Maybe most people. But for those who haven't tried it, it's kind of like the difference between watching a movie versus actually going to where that movie takes place. I think it's incredible. So my goal here is to get game worlds accessible in VR so it feels real, then live like the Shaper, just walking from world to world. Perhaps literally. Someday, I hope to have one of those 360 treadmills so I can walk in other worlds. And there are lots of worlds to see. I mean, there are thousands of 3D games. If this worked, you could visit any world over the past few decades, let alone in the future. So the thought that this could actually become a reality, and I could travel across endless worlds as though I was there? Cool, I guess we discovered the meaning of life. Took a long time, but here we are. I can't believe we're on the precipice of this actually happening. I mean, in the past, if you wanted to experience other worlds, all you really had were drugs, and you know that can't be reliable. I've seen a meme before about being born too late to explore Earth, too early to explore space, but just in time for the memes. I like that elf guy. Looks like something's going on with his eyes, though. Well, personally, I'm not worried about missing out on memes, but plundering the depths of human imagination made manifest in 3D space? Oh yeah, there's good stuff there. I want to traverse fantasy forest, Tron-like cyber cities, European countryside, interplanetary battlefields, endless worlds to explore. MMO players will talk about endgame content, meaning you've basically beaten the game, so now what do? Well, this could be the endgame content of gaming for me. In the future, I could see myself playing a game, then once I'm done, I put on a VR set and actually go visit that world. I'm obsessed with this idea. So yeah, that's the final group for the Dream software. Game explorers and VR enthusiasts. One of the complaints about VR is the lack of deep content. I mean, yeah, you have mini games for days, but large, massive worlds are rare compared to regular games. And I'm not speaking for everyone, but ironically, despite being a gamer and a VR enthusiast, I'm not sure how sold I am on VR gaming. There's a whole lot of games where when I consider everything I'm doing in them, I'm not sure my stomach could take them in VR. Vomiting just takes the fun out of any game for me. So I kind of need slower experiences for this. You know how some games have so little interaction that can be derisively called walking simulators? Because, ooh, great gameplay, you just walk forward. Well, that's almost what I want for VR. Hey, the Shaper just walks around. He's not running and jumping. The most he'll do is that teleport slam that'll kill you. Now, there are ways to convert a lot of games to VR right now, and sometimes those work well, but that can have issues. This video's long enough. Here's a big block of text on my take on that if you're curious. Plus, again, even if the 3D is perfect, the gameplay may still be a bad fit for VR. That's why the Dream software would solve so many of these problems. But even if you don't care about VR, have you ever come across a game world that seems cool but you have no interest in the gameplay at all? I have. I don't want to learn how to be a train conductor, but sure, I'll check out some scenic routes. Maybe mod things to have a Train to Busan reenactment. I've heard a lot of people say Anthem is not a great game, and I have no reason to doubt them. But hey, those alien world gorges that probably took millions in art assets to make. I wouldn't mind having a tour of that world. There are so many games like that. So even when a bad game comes out, it can still have plenty of redeeming value. Just not as that game. But even if you do like the game and think it's great, sometimes you just want more. Look at those islands in the background there. You don't go there in the game. I would want to go there and see that too. Well, for ripping the whole world, maybe you could. There's so much potential out there. So hopefully now you get why this is my dream software. If it worked, I get to be an interdimensional fantasy explorer for the rest of my life. That sounds pretty good to me. So that's the basic concept. But while I'm dreaming, let's talk bonus features. Again, I would want this streamlined so almost anybody could use it. Because the person who can do a lot in a game engine may not be the same person who's willing to go into the game and painstakingly record every inch of it. I'd also want scalability. Now, once the data is inside the game engine, that already scales to intermediate to advanced users, so there's not a lot to do there. But what if all you know how to do is press record? Well, once you recorded the data and fed it into the software and sent it to the engine, it could come up with some templates for you. So if you wanted a racing game, it could spawn a car with some driving physics so you could drive around. A first-person shooter? You spawn with a gun and maybe some generic enemies in the empty space. A third-person platformer? A generic guy that can jump around and climb things, and so on. It wouldn't be too hard to have these ready-made templates for your map just to get your foot in the door. Then, once you're in, you can have it easily change the time of day to whatever you want with some presets, something to set the mood. And if we're using AI to divine all this 3D geometry to begin with, why not use it for more things? Maybe the AI could be smart and take its best guess on what it thinks are light sources and try to create a similar value inside the engine. Or what if you were ripping an isometric game and there's no skybox for it? Well, the software could come with some pre-made ones for you to choose to help things out. And if you really wanted to take things to the next level, a whole ton of games only model what you see, and as soon as you step outside of the normal path, it's just a bunch of invisible textures and no geometry. Well, what if the AI analyzed your map and then took its best guess to fill in the map as much as you wanted? I mean, what if I wanted to go to that temple up there? What would I see? Probably not that much, but the AI could pad things out if I did. Or hey, a lot of times background images are just 2D sprites. Maybe the AI could have an additional mode to try and convert that to 3D space also. Yeah, I'm really dreaming now. I don't think procedural generation is a good substitute for an actual map, but I think it could be good for rounding out rough spots of an existing map or giving you more of a taste of a world you already like. The Dream software could take procedural generation a step further. So if you wanted to be conservative, it would only draw from existing assets in the map, so it would all look the same. Or you could let it be more experimental. If you've analyzed a bunch of maps, it might deduce your map resembles a medieval village, then take its best guess on generating something completely new from all its past samples to get something more fresh. AI can detect more patterns than we could ever think of. So maybe it could tell that this medieval village has a cartoonish art style to it and emulates that. Tell me this wouldn't be a cool feature. Finally, I'd want this software to accept user mods. Maybe you can only extract the world, but somebody out there has created NPCs to walk around or cars to drive on that the AI could try to figure out how to place because it thinks this is a road or a sidewalk. Or monsters for you to fight. Just anything to make the experience more of a game or just feel more alive. Or hey, sounds. The Dream software would do nothing for sound. People would need to add some back in manually. Really, this software could almost be a platform for launching off better things. So that's my Dream software. You go in, record the game, crunch it through the software, and end up with a map where you can do almost anything and trip from reality to reality. It would be awesome. Okay, now let's talk about all the problems with this. All right, now this part mainly applies to extrapolating 3D data from 2D imagery, because if we can actually access the 3D data from video card memory, then our main obstacles are just getting the APIs to play nicely and stitching it all together, which, that's still huge. So I'm assuming we can generate 3D data from 2D video under good conditions. Because if we can't do that, this is going nowhere anyway. I mean, honestly, this almost feels like magic to me. Yeah, I know it's based on pattern recognition, but it seems like there's so much that can go wrong. So assuming the magic phase works, the first problem I see is with lighting. See, if you just rip what you see out of a game, then all the shadows and coloring are gonna be baked into the textures. Kind of like how the shadows got burned into the ground at Hiroshima. Similar concept. That's not going to look good in another engine. Everything will be ugly and off and give you a bit of that freakish otherworld feeling like you got in Grim Fandango in the Land of the Living. We don't want that. Or what if the game has a quick day cycle so the lighting is constantly shifting, casting a different color on the textures? How does the software know what the real value is? Now, I've been told there's a process called inverse rendering to somehow undo this and divine what the original texture is supposed to be. To be honest, this also sounds like magic to me, but I can see we're going to need an extra layer of magic on top of the main layer of magic. Yeah. The next problem I see is with animation. See, there's one big difference between me and the Shaper. The Shaper seems content to walk across these worlds completely frozen in time. Not me. I mean, yeah, that's a lot easier, but I want the world to feel alive. And in order to do that, we need animation. Now, simple ones I think we could solve. Like, let's say some vegetation is swaying back and forth on a loop. I think the AI might be able to figure that out and recreate the loop. But let's say it's something more complicated, like a bird passing overhead. Well, if it does it regularly, it can mimic that action. But if it's irregular, maybe it could just have a default value to do it sparingly, like once a minute or every 5 minutes. I remember in the old Need for Speed games, you would have an event like a balloon rising that would only trigger some of the time. Now, we wouldn't want animations just snapping back into place once they're done. That would be awful. If the animation ends, maybe it can morph back into the starting position. Or if it was over a long distance, maybe it could just fade out. Now, of course, this could all be done manually, but I'm talking automated. We want the AI taking as many smart guesses as possible. Maybe even have a slider for how much agency you want to give it. Now, for complicated animations like cutscenes or where a bunch is going on, I honestly don't know how to handle this. This is either going to be unusable or take somebody smart to figure out. Another problem that will pervade a lot of games is how to handle the HUD. Now, if it's a simple HUD that's always in one place, I think the AI could work around that. Or you could just tell the AI to ignore these areas when analyzing the footage. But what if it's a HUD with 100 different things bouncing around? I don't know. That might be a problem if we're not working from the 3D data itself. Okay, for these next few problems, I'm going to show footage from the game Need for Speed because it encapsulates almost all of them. This game is both a best and worst case candidate for this kind of software. It's the best because this is a racing game. You just drive around, it's pretty simple. That shouldn't be too difficult to imitate if you have the assets. It's also online only. The second EA shuts down their servers, no one will be able to play this game again. So it needs to be preserved. It also can look gorgeous. This can really look like actual night driving. So this is a great candidate for preservation. It's also a terrible candidate because it has so many issues that would make it difficult for the Dream software. I'll go over them. Oh, and this is in Polish because I got punked by EA and didn't read the fine print about how my copy wasn't in English. Turns out if you're in Poland, it's impossible to buy an English copy of the game from EA themselves. They won't sell it to you. Now since then, the game's gone on Steam, so maybe that copy is in English. But what am I gonna do, buy the game twice? Ha! Okay, on to problems. First, this would probably have to be preserved from video footage. Again, I think if you tried to rip the 3D data directly, EA could detect that as a hack and ban your account. I mean, I could be wrong, but I didn't feel like burning my account to test that hypothesis. So that means we're limited by what we can see. That's a problem because this entire game is at night. It shifts between dusk and midnight, but it's always dark. Look at this. I can't see a damn thing unless it's in my headlights. How is the AI supposed to know what's there? It doesn't help that my camera controls are pretty much tied to my car, so I'm limited by what angles I can see. Next, it's not just you. This footage is blurry. I tried playing with the settings. The game either looks really blurry or has some of the worst aliasing I've seen. There's no winning here. These are both likely to confuse the AI. Next, we have some HUD elements, but I think some of these could be ignored. But the ones that are actually in 3D space like this? I think the AI would probably consider that part of the game architecture. And here's a big one. It is raining constantly in this game. What's it supposed to do with those rain dots on the virtual camera lens? That's gonna confuse it. Also, rain in a bunch of games isn't something we really want preserved. That's better added in. Because most games, you have your camera and you have your rain particle effect, and it just sort of follows you around and creates the illusion that it's raining everywhere. So not only does this distort the image, but it's gonna be messed up if we try to capture that. We don't want it. I don't have answers for this. And rain creates another problem here, and that's how do we handle reflections? Or what about transparencies like glass? Can the AI be smart enough to know it should just apply some shiny shader here and the puddle isn't actually an opening to an upside down world? And that brings up another problem, though not in this game. What do we do about impossible geometry? Though I'm not too worried about this one since this tends to be rare in games. Most don't have this. But back to rain, this is another problem. Because modern games use God knows how many layers of textures and shader effects to simulate reality. But can the AI figure out how to apply its own shader to the road here so the light shimmers in a similar way? I don't know. And another problem that affects almost every 3D game, though Need for Speed isn't too bad on this one, how do you handle level of detail changes? See, in many big open worlds, as you get closer to objects, they'll fade in higher detail models. Sometimes they just pop in out of nowhere. Well, that'll be confusing for the AI because from its perspective, reality just changed. I think this one might be solvable though, because the AI can maybe learn to be biased in favor of data closer to the viewer rather than data it perceives as farther away. So if it sees a conflict, it can know to go with the higher quality model. Although that brings up two more problems. First, what about enormous, massive open worlds? Those kinds of games usually have custom engines. That might be too much for Unreal or Unity, though I have more faith in that one being solved. But that brings me to the final problem I can think of, which is performance. For old games, this wouldn't matter. But for modern ones, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes optimization going on. Even if we could rip everything we see, it might run like molasses. I guess worst case scenario, we can always do the classic solution, and that's to drape your whole world in fog so you can hide the clipping plane. Then you have plenty of speed. Remember, Silent Hill has the answer to all your optimization problems. Really, I don't know if we'll solve all this. I think the best thing to do is just focus on the easy stuff and work our way up to the complex games and see where the AI breaks down. A lot of old games barely had anything animated in the world. Those would be the places to start. So yeah, that's a lot of problems. Now there is one other problem I can think of, but it's not a technical one. And honestly, I'm not too worried about it, but for the sake of the audience, I'll cover it quick. Copyright. First off, I'm pretty sure my dream software would be 100% legal. You're generating 3D data based off of images you're seeing on your screen or pulling from video card memory. You want to outlaw that, you may as well outlaw 3D graphics while you're at it. And if you're doing this for games that you personally bought a copy of for your own usage, I think you're still in the clear. I mean, feel free to check if you want. I did zero legal research for this video. I would think the law interpreting your right to record personal copies of what you see on TV means you're allowed to record your damn game, but God knows what copyright law wants to do these days. The point is, nobody's going to come after you for ripping game worlds. But if you put those game worlds online and distributed them to others, then yes, you could run into a lot of trouble with copyright, get sued, and so on. Unfortunately, that's also the best way to preserve games, through collaborative efforts. Now, if this was in a vacuum, I could see reasonable arguments from both sides, but it's not. We're at war. I mentioned in my Games as a Service video, the war on ownership. Companies are destroying games. They're destroying games they sold you perpetual licenses of, and they're not stopping. Every online-only game with no end-of-life plan is probably going to die, and you'll never be able to play it again. So I can't entertain arguments about copyright when it's been weaponized to rob buyers, destroy games, and their fantastic worlds. Now, there is a valid concern about having models or textures ripped and then sold by somebody else as if it's their own. Yeah, don't think I'm advocating for that. That's just stupid. But good news! You're protected under the law if that happens, and this software wouldn't change that. You actually can make money with this software, just not from ripping content. You don't want to be limbo of the lost. You could potentially make money developing and selling the software, or by creating assets for it, like weapon models or NPCs, or maybe by creating your own framework game designed to import these worlds into it. I don't know, that's not the point of this for me. I'm just trying to get to infinite worlds here. Now, as for actual game preservationists, I'm sorry, but I think your only option might be to go full outlaw. I mean, what are you gonna do, not preserve games? Come on. We're already in crazy land making game preservation illegal, so all I have are crazy solutions. Hey, I heard a lot of literature only survived the Middle Ages because monks copied it by hand. This is kind of the same thing. So hey, how about we have companies stop destroying games, as in all of them? Then we can have a reasonable discussion if this software goes too far or not. Until then, no, it wouldn't. I'm in the don't destroy games camp. I'm unmovable on this. Well, that wraps this up. I guess I should give some quick mentions to save myself some emails. I am aware of some sites that tie into some of what I said. There's the Game Tourism website, which has instructions on how to turn several games into walking simulators, but that's not that many. There's the No Clip website, which rip maps through some games, especially Nintendo ones. This is actually pretty damn close to what I'm talking about. We have lighting and animations, it looks good. But this isn't a browser, we don't have collision data, we can't add in our own features to make it more of a game, or change the time of day, or VR. Also, this is only for a couple dozen games, whereas I want the keys to the kingdom. So what I want is basically this with more features, except for every 3D game. Hey, it's my dream software. This is all just 3D data we're talking about. It's just not standardized and locked down to hell and back. And speaking of 3D, I'm also aware of that software to convert NES games into 3D. Yeah, even though I'm obsessed with making 3D games real 3D, I'm kind of okay with 2D games staying 2D. I mean, it's interesting, but it doesn't really put me in the world. It makes me feel like I'm watching a pop-up book. In my opinion, 3D games are where it's at for 3D gaming. And that's about it. Now you know my vision. Some of you may still think it's lame. That's okay. Not everybody's cut out to be a planeswalker. But if you like games or other worlds, you have to see the potential. You can always email me about this, but honestly, I'm probably not going to be much help on this one. I'm way out of my league with the technical skill required to pull this off. I made this video because I see no guarantee this software will exist in the future without me nudging it. It's not profitable enough. Big companies can't make money ripping copyrighted content. This is purely in the realm of hobbyist freaks like me. So this video is just me tossing a coin into a wishing well. It's my dream that in the future, whenever a game comes out that's even a little locked down, fans are ripping its world apart like a pack of hungry piranha. I think it's the only way we'll get to see all these worlds. I sometimes wonder if developers are aware of how much their software can affect users. Well, here you go. You get to see for yourself just how hungry I am for something like this. I doubt I'm the only one. That's it. I'll see you later. I'm off to see more worlds. Hey, want to see my dream software? Of course you do. Check it. Here's how it works. Say there's a game you like. You go in there and record it from all angles like you're doing a nature documentary or something. Then you feed that into the dream software and it spits out a world you can do anything with. Turn Sonic into a climbing exploration game. Take a train sim and add zombies. Take a story-based game about people's feelings and make it a story about blowing somebody's head off. Whatever. People can mod anything then. Did you know that somebody's making a 3D version of Zombies Ate My Neighbors? That's the power of modding. Well, this will be super modding. And hey, doesn't it suck when games get shut down? What's up with that? Well, if you had the Dream software, you could bring the levels back to life, and then maybe some modders could just bring the whole game back to life, like some sort of necromancer. That would be dope. And if you really want to trip out, you could go all out in VR and jump from world to world, and it would feel like you're really there. You'd be like Doctor Strange opening up portals to places. Tell me you don't want to do that. I do. And this isn't a total joke. AI is figuring out how to do all kinds of things. We just need to friggin' do it. Now, is this really difficult and technical and stuff? Sure is, but you're watching the short version. You don't need to worry about any of that crap. Hey, this stuff may as well be magic. Did you know Nvidia had an AI create a playable copy of Pac-Man just by looking at it? Friggin' magic. Cool, so tell your friends how awesome this would be, and if they can program, ask why they're not working on this already. I'm sure what they're working on is cooler than this. Alright, see ya!